DPS can have such a huge impact in your games, but you are playing it wrong, and that's why you can't carry your teammates. These are the 5 things that you need to start doing right now if you want to start popping off and climb very quickly. Now, the first one is overcommitting for plays, and this is something that every single DPS player does, where they walk out of spawn, they find some situation where they can go and make a play, get a kill, and if it goes wrong, they die. Then they walk out, they want to make that death up, and they go out again, and then they die again. Now they're getting flamed, so now they feel like they have to pop off even more, and the cycle continues, right? You're trying to constantly force the play, but every time you do, you're putting yourself in a very bad position. You're going all in, and you're greeding for the kill so much that you're just not doing the most important thing, which is living. If you put yourself in good positions around natural sources of cover like walls, buildings, cars, whatever the case may be, and you play to specifically live, then the opportunities for plays will come for you. Don't try to force every single engagement and don't try to force every single kill. The majority of the time, it's better to look for opponents being out of position and opportunities appearing in front of you rather than going and trying to force them when they're not really there. This is especially true if you consistently are dying and you're not finding value. Most of the time you're ignoring your fundamentals and you're trying too hard to make something happen and making yourself the target of the enemy team's plays. But then you might be wondering, Mills, if I'm not getting kills, then I'm useless. What am I supposed to be doing if I'm not getting kills? And this is where the big misunderstanding with DPS comes from. It's really a DPS's job to control space and control the angles. Ask yourself this question. Let's say the enemy team have a Cass, an Ashe, or a Hanzo. How does your team normally die to these characters? Most of the time, those characters are pushed up in an aggressive position. It could be the high ground above you. It could be a wide angle, left or right. And these characters are allowed to stay in these positions and take constant pot shots at your supports, at the rest of your team. So as a DPS, it's your job to contain the angles. You're controlling the space. Because if a Hanzo gets to peek an angle, take one shot, and if he hits it, then he's a god, but most of the time he's not. And then you instantly respond to that and he has to back away and go back to his team to get heals, that's a win. But if the Hanzo comes and gets to stay at a power position for 3, 4, 5, 6 shots, one of them's gonna hit, your teammates are gonna rage, and you're gonna lose the fight. As a DPS, it's not only your job to take aggressive space and go challenge people and shoot people non-stop, it's also your job to contest and control, especially other DPS, and prevent them from having extended period of time windows to attack your team from an unexpected angle that is adjacent to the normal pressure from the rest of their team. That is extremely important that you need to understand. Now, this is going to tie really into the third thing that you're not doing correctly, and it's playing to your hero's strengths, especially effective range and whether you can flank or not flank. Some characters are going to have positions that they want to play in at all possible, especially when they're in a matchup where they can really abuse said range. So let's say you're playing Widowmaker, right? If you're up against a Cass, you don't want to take him from mid-range. You want to fight him from the furthest possible range where he's a lot less effective. So you're constantly doing the extra amounts of steps to distance yourself properly, making sure that there's no flank angles that are relatively close to you, and keeping track relative of where the enemy team is. In addition to that, it helps you decide flank versus no flank. Remember the controlling angles tip we gave before? Let's say that you are on a far angle as a Cassidy, and the enemy DPS does exactly that. They control you by doing a little bit of damage to you on Cassidy. Now, not only is it going to be hard for you to run away if they are DPS that could chase you, right? Because you don't have a lot of mobility on Cassidy, but even if they don't chase you, you walked all the way over there as Cass, took one body shot, and now you have to go walk back to your team. You wasted your entire play, all your time, to try to go for this one play. And the only times this is really going to work, and the only times I suggest to even try this at all, is when there's a ton of distraction, like ultimates being used on both sides, there's a ton of pressure from your front line, from your team, and the enemy team are all distracted. Or 2, you're in a situation where you're just trying to reset anyways. If you go on an aggressive flank and you die, your goal isn't to run away, it's just to like go all in and try to make a play or reset because your team is already losing the fight and you need to go big to win the fight anyways. But let's cross this with another DPS like a Hanzo that could play an off angle from a very, very far distance away, making it so he's harder to clear from said angle. And as he runs away from said angle, he can Sonic it, so he can potentially kill any pursuers, so he's even more safe. And then We could even have a character like Soldier that can extend himself at an angle, not only because of his heal, but because he has the mobility to reposition, maybe go to a further angle or go back to his team much faster than other characters. So that's how you play to your hero's strength. A character that has low effective range and doesn't have any sustain probably shouldn't be flanking most of the time. Now, the fourth thing that you need to understand about DPS is that you actually have to be more patient than the other two roles. I know this is a weird concept, but DPS players need to understand that the timing of their engagement oftentimes matters more than the engagement themselves. Oftentimes, you'll see this from a DPS. A Tracer, they get into an aggressive angle, they double blink in, triple blink in, they try to duel somebody, everyone turns on them, then they recall, and guess what? Their team are finally here. Their team are finally ready to fight, and they are not, because they went and engaged too early. So the thing about a DPS is you need to put yourself in a safe but proactive position, somewhere that is close to the enemies where you want to go for a play. This is even more true if you're a dive character, by the way. Have all your cooldowns, not be actively engaged in the fight, nor are you giving away your position, but you're just waiting for your teammates to be ready to engage or actively engaging, and that's when you time your engagements. Because you really want two things to happen. You want, one, the extra amounts of pressure to make it so that not everyone on the enemy team can come and stop you and peel for you, right? That's really important because it's going to make your plays more likely to succeed. Or two, you want to get some amount of value from all of them trying to stop you if you do go for an aggressive play. Like, let's say you do go for the same play, but your team's there, and the entire enemy front line, everyone turned to start to deal with you. You recall back, but now your team got to push up aggressively, take a lot of space, maybe even get a pick because they were ready. And most of the time when you're complaining, my team isn't doing enough, I'm doing so much, it's because you are not timing your engagements with your team. You're not even putting them in a situation where even minimum amounts of pressure could get a crazy amount of value. And this is because you are not being patient. Now, the last thing that I want to give you, the last bit of advice I'll give DPS players, and I find this a lot when I'm coaching DPS players, where they really want to be a good Tracer, a really good Genji, a really good Widow. Doesn't really matter what the DPS it is, but they want to be a really, really great DPS player of some certain DPS. But I look at their card, what characters they play, and they'll play 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, whatever, how many heroes, right? They're playing all the heroes that they can. And I'm like, okay, why do you keep swapping here and there and here and there? And every time they walk out of spawn on whatever hero they are, maybe they're missing shots, maybe they're not performing well, they swap to some other easier character or some character that better fits the mold of what they think they need. And it typically comes from either fear of losing or they're not confident in their skill on said character. But here's the problem. This is ultimately running away from your development on whatever character you're trying to get good at. If you want to be a really, really good Widowmaker player, I'm not saying you have to play her every single game or every single round, but what I am saying is that if you keep running away from her when you're in silver, then you are not going to be able to perform on her in gold, and you will not be able to perform on her in plat or diamond. The only way out is through, and you got to be okay with losing games now because it's going to further your development down the line. Finding these hard situations on Widow or finding these hard situations on Tracer, trying to figure out a solution, practicing repetition, that's how you get better at these characters. So I want you to really think about not just what type of rank you want to become, but what kind of player you want to be. What kind of skill sets do you want to have? And don't just run away from something because it might get you a loss in the moment, or it might be hard because you might be dissatisfied later on. But definitely let me know if you have any questions, and smash the like, subscribe if you enjoy the content, but I will see you next time.